Hey everybody, and welcome to part 4. And what did I tell you about chapter 3? Man, are you kidding me? That that chapter, I told you, has everything. It's one of those you have to sit back after and just kind of process it. You got to sort of take that in and let that just sink in to your soul, to your heart, your spirit, your bones, everything, your brain. Wow, it's got so much into it. I certainly hope that you guys got something out of that. I mean, there's so much in there. I hope you got a lot out of it because there's so much in there, and what that chapter does to set up everything else, not just through the Bible, but through our lives even now. It is incredible. It's so crazy. And wow, we're going to see just how it plays out even more here in chapter 4. And again, through the rest of the Bible, what I would say to you is continue to go back and visit chapter 3 as you read through Genesis and the other books of the Bible, because again, what's going to take place, what's going to start to unfold, again, it's going to all point back to that chapter, what took place there. And we're going to start to see the underworkings and the undertow of Satan in that scheme and what he got mankind to do, and the stain of sin that is now on their hearts, how that continues to flow and spread and everything. And then also at the same time, oh, God's grace and his power, his divine power and his hands, how he is constantly guiding our lives to achieve that promise that he made. You remember that? So small, such a simple promise that the offspring of the woman, the offspring of Eve, was going to come and crush the head of Satan. It's like, wow, it's so crazy. And that right there, that promise, hold on to that, because again, as we read through, we're going to find so many other parts of this Bible, so many that are going to expand upon that. And we're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's what that was talking about. And it's like, yeah, see, I told you. Look how crazy this thing is. Look how it starts. These fine details start to paint this full big picture for us. And we just sit back and like, wow, Lord, you are amazing. Right? And so, again, it's going to continue on right here into chapter 4. And we're going to notice a lot of things. One of those is how chapter 4, a lot of what happens with the interaction here mirrors exactly what took place in chapter 3. And it's so cool. So let's get started. I'm ready to help uncover some things again, and for you guys to discover it. But please, again, the one who is doing this is him. Pray that God would meet you here and just feed into your spirit, right, with this word, and begin to make that picture come into focus and uncover these fine details. Such an amazing thing. So please don't forget to pray. All right, so chapter 4, here we go. Remember, all the way back in chapter 2, it seems like a long time ago, the first command that God gave to Adam when he was created was be fruitful and multiply. Right? Here we go, first verse. Adam and Eve, they're getting fruitful and they're multiplying. So you can read what that is. Obviously, Adam makes love to his wife Eve, and she becomes pregnant. And here's where it gets interesting. When she gave birth, their first son, it doesn't say their first child or anything, but this is mention of their first son, and this is Cain. It's interesting what Eve says here. Watch this. It says, with the Lord's help, I have produced, or I have acquired, a man. That's interesting. That's interesting. And she says, I have produced a man. And some of the other translations, they say it like, with the Lord's provision, with the Lord's help, I have acquired the man. Some say the Lord. I have produced the man. I have produced the Lord. It's like, well, what is this meaning here? Why is she saying it like that? And think back, right, to chapter 3, what we just came out of, and that promise that was given. Remember, Adam and Eve, they were part of that whole conversation there with God. And when God was talking to the serpent, to Satan, they were right there. And so they heard this promise that that Eve's offspring to come was going to defeat that evil and that sin and that serpent, Satan, that had just tempted them and gotten them to disobey God and stain their lives and their hearts with sin, which got them thrown out of the garden. And now they're not going to live forever, right? They were given that. And so what do you think that Eve is thinking? What do you think Adam is thinking with their first, son that is born? Man, they must have been thinking, this is him. This is it. This is what God promised us. This is that seed. This is the offspring that's going to restore us, that's going to save us and restore us back to the garden, which, remember, that was our paradise. That was heaven. So this, Cain, this is our Savior. This is it. And so that's why she responds that way. And keep that sort of, that perspective, in your mind. You got to kind of assume at that point then, if that's what they were thinking of Cain, then, perhaps I wrote a note that, well, maybe he was raised with the anticipation, right? That anticipation that he was going to save his family and restore them back, to the paradise where they were intended to be. And wow, growing up that way, with that type of around you, it's like, wow, that's heavy. We'll get into that. We'll see how that kind of plays out. But in verse 2, it says, later she gave birth to his brother. His little brother came along, and his name was Abel. And it's cool. It says Abel became a shepherd, right? Very important that he would shepherd and tend, care for the flock and the livestock and all of that, that they had. Very important to take care of that. It says, while Cain cultivated the ground. Now, remember, the very end of chapter 3, it said God sent Adam out to cultivate the ground from which he had been made. And remember that the curse, the sentence as well, said, Adam, you're now going to have to work for the ground to produce for you. You're going to have to sweat. You're going to have to toil and stress over it. You're going to become this farmer that has to labor for the ground, to be able to produce and sustain you. So with their first son, again, Cain comes along, like father, like son. He's going to be taught how to become that farmer. And that's what he became. So here we go. Here's where it starts to get even more interesting. It says in verse 3, when it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. And so Abel, little brother, following suit as big brother, Abel also brought a gift to the Lord, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. And this made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. All right, let's take a time out right here real quick. Okay, what's going on here? What's happening? And why did God accept Abel's gift and reject Cain's gift? Like, what's that all about? And I kid you not, guys, I'm sitting here last night reading this, writing down a few more notes, and it hit me again. Like I knew what the baseline was around all this, why God didn't. But here in the actual text, it gives something, and I wasn't quite getting it from the actual verse itself. And last night I did. And it's one word. Check this out. Watch. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift. But he did not accept Cain and his gift. So that one word, and, right there, does something. It's saying that the Lord accepted Abel, and then he also accepted his gift. But he did not accept Cain, and also he did not accept Cain's gift. So that is telling us this right here, that you could say, well, why did he not accept, why did he accept Abel's gift and not Cain's? Was it about what was given? Was it what you said about, Cain just presented some crops and Abel presented the best portions? Was it that? And it's like, it wasn't so much about what was given, it was all about who was giving, the heart of the person that was giving the gift and how it was being given. That is what this is all about. It goes to say, I love to find something that Jesus has to say about this. And we get a clue right here in Matthew 23, verse 35. It says, Jesus said that Abel was righteous. So Abel had this righteous person, always out to do good and to be righteous after God, and that, seeking after that fellowship with God and obeying God, doing good, right? And then how he was giving it. Watch, it follows up. Hebrews 11, verse 4 said the offering made by faith. I actually want to get this out because this expands on it even more. So Hebrews 11, verse 4, it says, by faith, Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained the testimony that he was righteous. All right, and then we're going to skip ahead to verse 6, and it says, and without faith, it is impossible to please him, to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him. Guys, God accepted Abel because of who he was, of his heart. He was righteous, and how he was giving this gift. He was giving this gift, and his life was all about faith. Complete faith and trusting in God and giving to God in faith. That's what the rest of the Bible says about this right here. This is why God accepted and was pleased by this gift. Other translations say that the Lord God showed favor to Abel's offering. God was pleased by this. He was pleased by who was giving it. He accepted who was giving the gift and how it was being given. Cain, right? There's something going on because God did not accept Cain, who he was, and he was not pleased with Cain's heart and how he was giving his gift. And so this is why he was rejected. And watch, again, we're going to find out more about this right here. So obviously Cain's angry. He's upset. He's jealous. Watch how God approaches this right here. He says, why are you so angry? He asked Cain. Why do you look so dejected? I love this. You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. So hang on right there. Check that out. Just like a father would do, right? With his child that is angry and all up in their feelings and everything going on like that. And God can obviously see the heart of Cain. He knows what's going on inside. So he says, why are you so angry? Why do you look so dejected? Because look, if you do what is right, if you listen to me, have faith in me and obey what I'm saying, and you do what is right, then you will be accepted. You will be shown favor. You will be blessed. And then here we go. But if you refuse to do what is right, if you refuse to listen, if you refuse to obey, then watch out. Isn't this similar to, to God and the command that he gave to Adam? Like, hey, here's the deal, right? And if you don't listen, then here's what's going to happen, right? And he lays this out. Well, look at this advice. And man, he says, watch what he says right here, folks, about sin. When he says, if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. And watch what he says, what our Lord God, these are his words, says about sin. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you. But you must subdue it and be its master. Wow. So man, mankind just sinned, just disobeyed in chapter 3. And look how God is describing sin right here. Look at the description that he gives it. Remember chapter 3, we talked about just that little bit of room. Sin is crouching at the door, waiting for that little bit of room to bust in, eager to control you, to consume your life. This is what we're dealing with, and that is Satan's goal. That's what he wants. That's his greatest desire. Whew. It's just to get in through that little crack in the door, and that sin would take over your heart, because then, boom, there we go. You're just going to be controlled by this, consumed by this. And God says, but you must subdue it and be its master. This is telling us something so important right here, that we have the ability. If God is saying that you must do something, then obviously we have the ability to do it. Just like we have the ability to obey his commands. We have the ability to subdue sin, to subdue its attack, and to master its attack and its desire to control us. Sin is trying to control our lives. We have the ability to master it. But how often do we just let sin that's crouching out right outside the door, just let him in and control our lives? And this is that fatherly approach, though. Look at that. How much he cares. What great advice that is to Cain. And the Lord can see his heart, and look how he cares for him. And you're like, man, wow, things are going to turn around. Nope. Watch what happens. So one day, Cain suggests to his little brother, his little baby brother, Abel, let's go out to the fields. Look what he does here. He's taking him away from the safety and the security of home, and let's go out into the fields, and I'm going to get you alone. And so what happens? Cain attacks Abel and kills him. And so, wow, here we go. Right into chapter 4, right out of chapter 3. And remember, we're asking that question, like, why such a harsh penalty, for a sin so small like that? And it's never just a small sin, because look at how that ripple effect, look at how it can spread and grow and down into, the children of Adam and Eve. And I love what the study Bible says here. It says, Adam and Eve's disobedience brought sin into the human race. And they may have brought their thought that their sin, just eating a piece of fruit, wasn't very bad, but notice how quickly their sinful nature developed, how it just spawned, right, and spread. Simple disobedience quickly degenerated into outright murder. And I love this. It says Adam and Eve, they only acted against God, right? But Cain right here acted against both God and another person, another human being. Small sin has such a way of growing out of control. So again, we say, why would he kick us out of eternity, out of our heaven? Because God knows what is best. He knows what sin is going to do. Once we let it into our lives, he knows how it's going to wreak havoc, and just consume our lives and escalate and grow into what it just did right here, to murder, to murder another creation, another person that God put here on this earth. Whew, man, this is what we're dealing with here. So yeah, the heaven, that paradise for us, heaven on here on earth, the Garden of Eden. Ah, oh, we were separated from that. We can't exist there with the stain of sin in our lives because of how it is going to spread. But again, remember that hope. Wow, and we're going to get to that later. But for now, let's wrap up chapter 4. So watch what happens. Watch watch God's approach here and look at how it mirrors exactly what happened again in chapter 3. And it says, afterward, the Lord asked Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel?" Does that sound familiar to when he said to Adam, "Where are you?" Right? Come on out. Like, what happened, right? It's same exact thing. God is given the opportunity. He's wanting that fellowship, giving Cain, his child, his son, who he knows has just done something horrible, still giving his child an opportunity to come forward, to come clean and say, "Lord, this is what I did. I was so angry, and man, what is this? Why did I do that?" That would have been awesome. And he didn't do it, just like before. Here we go. Look at his response. Cain says, "I don't know. Am I my brother's guardian? Am I my brother's keeper?" Like, wow. Man, if my kids responded that way, it'd be like, all right, but watch. Here we go. Watch what God says. That was his opportunity, and he just said, "I don't know. Yeah, well, I'm not in charge of him." God says, "What have you done? Listen, your brother, his blood, Abel's blood, cries out to me from the ground." What have you done, Cain? Listen, I can hear your brother's blood crying out to me from the ground. I know what you've done. I just gave you the opportunity to tell me what happened, and you just disregarded it. And I can hear, trust me, I know. And so now that you've done that, and after the advice that I gave you such sound advice. I told you, if you would just do what is right, change your ways, then I will accept you, and you come into this new place, this new relationship with me. I told you that, but now that you have disobeyed again, here we go. Now you are cursed and banished from the ground. Does that sound familiar? Now you are cursed and banished. Again, chapter 3, look at what's going on here. So he's cursed and he's banished him from the ground, which has swallowed your brother's blood. And he goes on, no longer will the ground yield good crops for you. The thing that your father Adam has taught you how to do, to cultivate, to farm the ground, the one thing that you've learned how to do, and that's your life's work, it's not going to work anymore for you. No matter how hard you work, no longer will the ground yield to you. It's cursed because of what you've done. It has swallowed your brother's blood. And so you're not going to, the ground has died for you. Man. And then he also says, and from now on you will be a homeless wanderer on the earth. A lot of people talk about this punishment, and there's a question of why was this it, for Cain. He committed murder. This was the first murder in the Bible. Correction, it wasn't. First murder was in chapter 3. This was the first of another human murdering another human being. First murder was chapter 3, Satan and what he did to us. But here we go. People ask, well, why was it this sentence, and not taking his life? And we'll get a lot more into that. Trust me, we'll expand upon that. But there was no command against that right now. There was no thing of like, you can't do this. Just like, remember, God gave the command to Adam, you can't eat the fruit of this tree. If you do, here's the consequence. That was a law, that was a command going into place. There was no command for what had been done yet. Right? So that's why the sentence is the way that it is. But essentially this was a different type of death, even a more harsh punishment. Because look what happens. Look how Cain replies. And he says, "My punishment, this is too great for me to bear. You have banished me from the land and from your presence. You have made me a homeless wanderer, and anyone who finds me will kill me." So that's what he says. This type of punishment right there is is the equivalent of death. He's like, this is too much, and if anyone finds me, I'm as good as dead. You've banished me from the land and from your presence. So it's like, man, he knew that God, his presence was good, and now he's banished. He's out of that. He's separated from that. Sound familiar, right? You've made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me. Notice this right here is that in Cain's reply after God said, notice how he just complains about his punishment. Notice again, he still has not said, "I'm sorry." That you notice that? He just immediately goes straight to the punishment and say, "Oh my, this is too much, man. This is like unfair." He doesn't say anything. He still doesn't even acknowledge his sin and what he did, that it was wrong, and ask for forgiveness. Say, "I'm sorry, Lord, about this. I'm sorry, Father." He doesn't do that. And raise your hand, how many of you have done just like Cain did right here? I'm raising my hand. I have. Absolutely. How many times we do that when we have done something wrong, we have disobeyed, committed sin, and then there's this result, there's that consequence, and the first thing we do is, one, we either toss the blame like Adam and Eve did, right? Or we do this and we just complain about now what has resulted in that. We complain about the consequence and the punishment of that, the result of what had happened, instead of just saying, "You know what? I'm sorry, I screwed up." To humble ourselves and just, man, Lord, please tell me, like, how many of us do that? I have. We all have, honestly. So, man, that how he responds there, is crazy. So again, folks, look at how all of this has just, man, it has blown up. And notice this is that when Cain replied that way, watch what the Lord does. He says, "No." He says, anyone who kills you, their punishment will be sevenfold. And he even goes as far, he gives Cain a mark. He gives him something specific that is going to warn anyone else who might try to kill him. That's crazy, right? So then Cain leaves the Lord's presence and then settles in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So after all of that took place, still look at God's approach, his grace there, and say, nope, their punishment will be even more, anyone who tries to kill you. And I'm even going to warn everyone else by putting something specific, by creating this mark, something that's going to show everyone, say, nope, warning, you don't try to kill this dude, right? And it's crazy. It's like, wow. And what I want you to do is I want you to continue to read the rest. It's going to start going into the descendants of Cain. I want you to read the rest of chapter 4 there and continue reading through chapter 5, because here's what's going to happen. We're going to pick up in the next part in chapter 6. It's not because the rest of this isn't important. Here's what I want you to do. Read through it and notice this right here. Remember in chapter 3, again, we can go back to chapter 3, and how when God was sentencing, when he was talking to Satan, what he said about the division of mankind, the division of Satan's offspring between, and the hostility between Satan's offspring and, right, Eve's. Right? There's going to be this division of mankind. And folks, here we have it. The first children, the first boys that are born, here we go. It's already started. It has already started. So the offspring of wickedness, Cain, right here, who thought that he was going to be this promised one that was going to lead him, back. So maybe he had this pride, all that type of story going on. So this offspring of wickedness and this offspring of righteousness, this person that was after God. And look at the division already and what has taken place in that hostility. And man, in such a major way, these first two sons that were born, here's how quickly it's happening. And keep that in mind as you read through the rest of chapter 4 and into chapter 5, because you're going to see the descendants of Cain, right? We're going to start to grow this line of this just wicked people, this people that just have this sin in them, and they're going to keep going down the same path. And then here comes this other line. Watch what happens at the end of chapter 4 when it says, Adam and Eve gave birth to another son, and it was replacing Abel, because his name was Seth, and Eve said, God has granted me another son in place of Abel. And watch what happens here. It says, at that time people first began to worship the Lord by name. So again, Cain and his line, you're going to see that. And then we're introduced to this Seth, who at the time of his birth, and when he had a son named Enosh, these people began to worship the Lord. They began to have that fellowship with the Lord. So here we go. Here's how the story start to see that picture, how it's going to start to grow and spread. There's going to be this division of mankind, right? And this hostility. Here's how it begins right here, folks. It is crazy. Trust me. And chapter 5, you're going to go through the descendants of Adam, and it's going to go from Adam all the way to Noah. Seth is involved there. You're going to see that line. And when we get to Noah and we open up in the next part into chapter 6, man, all right, here we go. It's going to get your boxing gloves on. It's going to get intense. It's going to get even more awesome and just in depth. And we're going to see how everything starts unfolding even more. So continue to read on, and we'll catch up in the next part. Love you guys. Peace.